Oh, hell, they're calling the safety, man.
Oh, y'all get your stuff on. Get everything on, man.
They're calling the safety, man. I'll be in the back.
Here comes the clipboard, man.
Wonder if he brought something to eat.
Hello and welcome to Safety Man Coming, the podcast about the people behind the cones on the roadway. This episode introduces us to Robert Skinner. Robert spent over 40 years in roadway construction. He spent the majority of that time working for the state, the final few years working on the other side with a contractor. Robert takes us through what is essentially an oral history of the people and places of highway construction in eastern Arkansas. He also discusses how he got into the business and how technology changed the way he did his work. Hold on, this is my favorite part. So yeah, we will see how technology has helped pave the way, no pun intended, to better roads. And spoiler alert, it happens more than once. We literally recorded this in a shed during a rainstorm, so give us a little grace on the recording quality.
Hi, Robert Skinner. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great.
Good. First of all, I appreciate you doing this in the middle of a monsoon. I saw a lot of animals driving in. I always saw two, never more, never less. I don't know if that means anything, but saw a lot of animals trying to get out of the weather. So, how are you enjoying retirement?
I don't like being retired, and I've taken up some hobbies to do something to kind of spend my time. And once I started that, it's better. I actually retired from the highway department in the engineering division in 2005, and I lasted about 6 months, and I couldn't stand it. And then there was an engineer that had worked for the highway department that was now with out of Memphis, and he found out that I wasn't liking being retired, so he approached me and wanted to see if I wanted to go to work for. Well, it kind of took me by surprise, more or less. I wasn't on the best of terms with a lot of people. Being on the inspection side, and of course I was dedicated to my job through the highway department, and at the time I had the mindset that whatever the spec book said, that's what you did and everything, and I still hold to that pretty much. But during my time with I did see a few things that I felt were unfair to a contractor.
You start seeing it from another perspective.
Right, definitely. But I mean, overall, I still wanted it that way, and I had some of the people tell me to my face that I still worked for the highway department.
Right.
But I was fortunate in the engineer that hired me. He moved to Florida initially, and I think he's back in Fayetteville, Arkansas now. But he left, and then there had been a resident engineer in West Memphis that had a little falling out with the highway department, and then he went to work pretty high up the ladder. And anyway, they kind of put me with him, and we had a lot in common because he, too, wanted everything done the highway department way. They told me up front that what they wanted me to do was basically what I'd been doing with the state, to get the people to doing the project as they should, so they didn't have to redo anything.
Right.
You don't get paid for reovers. You know, when you mess up, you have to change it, but I got a lot of them mad at me because I would go from one job to another, different phases of work, and I would see something going wrong, and I would kind of butt in a little bit, and that's how they felt I was doing. I just kind of butting in.
Right.
But, that was my job, to try to teach them how to do. A lot of them knew, they just wasn't going to do it. But anyway, after a while, things eased up a little bit, and they began to listen to me somewhat. But anyway, that was how I got involved with
Right. And that's how I came to know you.
Right.
And so when I came in on the survey side, and we're going to talk about that some because that was the whole reason I wanted to talk to you. But let's kind of go back to the beginning. So, are you born and raised here?
Yes, I was born in Brinkley.
Okay.
I went to school first, second, and third grade there in Brinkley, and then we moved to St. Louis, and we was there part of my fourth grade, but then it was back to Brinkley at that time.
Right.
And I graduated from Brinkley High School. My dad, who lived in St. Louis, had plans for me to go to college and all that stuff. But at that time, I felt like I had all the education I wanted.
Right.
And,
Maybe not all you needed, but all you wanted.
Right. I turned it down. I mean, he had a duplex house up there close to whatever that, it's junior college up there. Can't remember the name of it. But anyway, he's going to let me live in one side of it. He rented the other side out to college kids as well. But anyway, I don't know. I just decided I just didn't want any more school at the time.
So what did you have in your mind what did you see yourself doing? What did you want to do?
I didn't really know. Right after I graduated, I knew I had to do something. My mother wasn't going to let me just lay around the house.
Right.
So there was a man in Brinkley that had a company building these telephone towers, these huge ones. Well, not just telephone. He some of the radio stations, the real tall towers and things like that. And he hired a lot of the local boys, and there's no telling how many that worked for him. Nobody works for him very long because you can't get along with him.
Right.
But anyway, I did that. I went to work with him, and I got tired of living out of a suitcase. I was, I don't know, you'd be in South Carolina today and get a phone call, and they'd need you in Waco, Texas 2 days from then. And it's just a constant back and forth living in motels. And I didn't do that for about 6 months.
Right.
I had all of that I wanted. I didn't really. I had a little part-time job. I could work anytime I wanted to at a little grocery store. Now, during high school, well, actually junior high, I worked at this little store there in downtown Brinkley, and the man that owned it taught me to cut meat. Mm-hmm. So the last 3 years, I guess, I was a butcher.
Yep.
And I had some opportunities to continue in that with some of these meat producers. They would come by the store and like that. The biggest thing was, they would pay for everything, but you had to sign some kind of an agreement you'd work for them for X number of years. And I was going to have to go to Nebraska. Well, I had no intentions of going to Nebraska. I just didn't. Long about then, all I could think about was getting out, chasing girls, and, drinking my beer and right. what have you. So anyway, and growing up, our landlady was a state senator. And for graduation, if I wanted, she was going to see to it that I could go through the state police academy. Another thing I didn't want.
Yeah.
I had no desire to be a police officer. Now I am. I actually am an auxiliary member of the Monroe County Sheriff's Department.
Really?
And I don't get out as much as I did a few years ago, but yeah, I'm still active.
Well, look, I want to tell you, I got here a little faster than I probably should have, and I want to tell you that up front. I don't want any trouble later on, right?
I hear you. But I didn't really know what exactly I wanted to do, but at the time, this was in 1969. I graduated in 67. This was in 69. Interstate 40 they had sections of it open, but they were still working on a lot of it. And I got to where I was hanging around the pool hall a lot and everything. Somebody come in there talking about, if you need a job, you go out there. So just to have a job, I went out there. And, of course, I didn't know how to do anything at all. I mean, I had to be shown everything that I did. But I kind of enjoyed it. It was being out. I didn't, working at the grocery store inside all day. And I didn't really like that. I like being out. And anyway, I stayed with them. Let me see how long. About a year, I guess. They were finishing up here in Arkansas. And they were going to go to Broken Bow, Oklahoma. That was their next big project. And they told me if I wanted to go, they'd teach me to operate any of the equipment that I wanted to learn on or anything. And that didn't sound too good either. At the
you're
time,
back to living out of a suitcase.
Yeah, right. I had during that time, I'd had a girl that I'd been dating since school and everything, and we decided to get married. So anyway, I had to turn them down on that. But while the work was still going, I got acquainted with the state inspectors out there, And I found out one of them was going to leave the highway department and become a state trooper. And then I guess you'd call him the head. I don't know what his actual title was. He's the assistant to the resident engineer, I guess you'd call him that. He came by, and I had heard that this inspector, his name was Frank, was going to leave the highway department. And just jokingly, I told Lewis, his name's Lewis, which Lewis became more to me than just boss. I'll get into that as we go. But anyway, I just kind of jokingly said, I want Frank's job when he leaves. And he didn't really say anything, didn't do anything. But then he approached me the next day and said, were you serious about that? And I said, yeah. I don't, when he asked me that question, that made my mind up. I want to do that. So anyway, he brought me some paperwork and everything. And then I had to get some signatures for, some references. And one of them was my landlady. Now, I knew she was a state senator, but I had no earthly idea what kind of power a state senator has. But anyway, Lewis filled the paperwork out. He said he'd take it in. The office itself was in West Helena, and but they had a little sub office in Brinkley. So very seldom went to Helena, but actually that's where I worked out of. But anyway, Lewis told me, he said, well, it usually takes 2 or 3 weeks because they'll do a background check on you and they'll do this and that and everything. So that's fine and everything. So anyway, I got the paperwork filled out. One of them was the mayor of Brinkley. I've known him all my life.
Right.
And everything. But then I got Miss Dorothy Allen, the state senator. Her husband was a state senator and died in office, and they allowed her to finish his term, and then she ran on her own from then on. Uh-huh. But anyway, it was maybe 2 days after Lewis turned the paperwork in. The resident engineer from down there drove from Helena out there on the interstate to talk to me. And he wanted to know, how do you know Miss Dorothy Allen? I said, well, she's my landlady. But she said, well, I just wondered. She said, I noticed, you put her down as a reference, and she wrote some kind of little note on there and everything. So I just wondered. And that was the end of the conversation. Right. Well, after Claude, after he went back to Helena, Lewis said, usually this takes a long time, but with her name on there, you're hired. You need to start, such and such a day. But, I got started at it. I was, I don't know, there was an awful lot to learn. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a whole lot of physical stuff at that particular time. Now, we did get into a lot more physical stuff as I went on. He gave me a spec book and told me to read it, and he said, I know you're not going to understand a lot of it, but just kind of read it. And there were some people putting guardrail up at the time. And so he showed me the section in the book where the guardrail was and told me, just read up on that. Well, I did. I got to reading about it and everything. And some of it made a little sense to me. But at the same time, he said, the main thing, you're an inspector and you don't know what actually is going on. Act like you do. Said they,
yeah.
As long as you act like you know what's going on, most of them are not going to try to do anything.
Right. Fake it till you make it.
Right. They and all in all, most contractors are honest when you have an inspector standing there.
Yeah.
I can't say that about all of them. Some of them.
Yeah.
Some of them they try to take shortcuts and things like that, and I understand that. I don't, what they're doing. Everything, but anyway, I'd worked about 1.5 years with them. We were finishing up everything on the interstate, and I don't know, I'd actually married the girl that I'd been going with for several years and everything. We got to having problems and everything, and I just got disgusted and quit. I just quit. Lewis told me, he said, no, just take off a little time. You got a little vacation built up. Just take it off and cool down and everything. And I said, well, okay, I'll think about it. But I didn't. I went ahead and quit. I moved to Memphis and Went to work. There was a brand new Walgreens drug warehouse. Had just been completed. They just built it, and they were hiring people to do that. Anyway, I wound up going there, and they hired me right on the spot. And it was just basically picking up cases and moving them here and there, little forklift work, things along that line. But I didn't really like it. I don't know. I decided I'd come back home.
Right.
And I wound up moving in with my mother, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
There.
It's not where you saw yourself. But.
No, definitely a lot. But anyway, I caught, and as it so happened, they were building, it used to be, it's 5-lane now through Brinkley, but at the time we built it as a 4-lane.
Mm-hmm.
They just got started on that. Anyway, and when I got back into Brinkley, I saw Lewis and a couple other guys on the side of the road, and I pulled over there. I told Lewis, I said, I want my job back. And he said, we'll give you your job back. How long are you going to stay this time?
Yeah.
I said, you give me my job back, y'all have to run me off.
Right.
And that's something I stuck with that. I don't know, I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the people I worked with.
Mm-hmm.
And I was learning. I learned a lot of things. All right, there was one thing that I didn't like is there's reports that have to be made out every single day. If you're dealing with gravel, you've got gravel reports to deal with.
Yep.
If you're testing materials, you have tests that have to be filled out, and somebody has to go over them before any of this kind of stuff is submitted to the office in Helena. And Lewis, he was our boss. At the end of every day, he would sit down. We'd bring, we'd be out in the field or something. We'd come in with a stack of tickets, like that. And I had learned about stations, so I could kind of keep up with where things were. And we'd have to sit there until Lewis got through with all the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'd let us go. Now, back then, we didn't get overtime. We didn't get nothing. I mean, you just worked whenever.
Yeah.
And it was pretty well, from sun up till after sundown a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
But without any compensation, that was just part of the job. Well, I'd got to the point I'd started messing with another girl, I guess, and I knew I had sat there and watched Lewis fool with that paperwork, everything, and I told the other guys, I said, I'm fixing to start on this. I think I know how to do it.
Right.
Everything. So I did. Well, Lewis had gone. Actually, Claude from Helena, resident engineer, was in Brinkley, and he got Lewis with him, and they were riding, looking at other jobs or something. And we got back when Claude let Lewis back out there at the field shack. I had all the paperwork done, and he looked it over and everything. And he said, "Well, you boys going home." Well, early the next morning, he went out on the road where I was, and he said, "Well, how did you know to do that?" I said, "Well, I've watched you. I watched you fill it out." I had a motive, so it wasn't quite
right. Yeah.
I wanted to go home.
Yeah,
I was ready to get out and sow my oats.
Right. Yeah, you weren't trying to get better at work.
Right.
You were trying to get out of work.
But that was probably a turning point in my highway department career. As I look back on it, after that, I don't know, Lewis kind of took me under his wing, and he worked with me a lot on all the math that's involved in there, and he kept telling me you need to learn a triangle inside out. I didn't realize there was as much trigonometry in the engineering side of everything as there actually is.
Yep.
So anyway, I did, I tried to study as much as I could on it and everything, but Lewis just took me under his wing, and from then on, I pretty well had it made. I actually began to get raises. I got moved up well ahead of the people that had been there a lot longer than I did, and there was a little, I guess you'd call a little animosity there. They didn't feel like, he's been here 3 years and I've been here 10, and he's already, high up. But that one thing that I did affected my future career. Mm-hmm. And I made senior inspector like in 5 years, and which is unheard of. It just don't happen. It don't.
That's probably a good little lesson for some folks if they're getting into anything in this business is show a little bit of initiative.
Right. That's it right there. But these other guys had been working with Lewis for literally years and never attempted to try to do anything. They didn't do anything on their own. Mm-hmm. It was, if they were told to do something, yeah, they'd do that, but no initiative.
Yep.
They didn't. And of course, even though my initiative was
look, initiative is initiative.
Right. It was I had a motive.
Right.
I just wanted to get loose.
Yep.
But as time went on, Claude, the resident engineer, he was supposed to go to a lot of different seminars and things like that. He hated going.
Mm-hmm.
He would send me. I would go, on these 2 and 3 day things. There was several times I was the only non-engineer in the bunch.
Yeah.
The only.
Get a little bit of imposter syndrome, like
yes, I felt out of place.
Yeah,
you're in there, but it wasn't as bad because they weren't talking too far over my head. I understood a lot of what was going on, but anyway, and as I look back, all of these things, all the breaks that I got and everything, I felt like stemmed from that one day that I took the time to fill out all the reports.
Yep.
And everything. So that helped my career along. I'd been with them maybe 15 years, I guess. And Lewis was going to retire, but he decided he wanted to be a land surveyor.
Mm-hmm.
And so he started studying to do that. And a year or so later, he got licensed in the state of Arkansas as a certified registered land surveyor. Well, from the time he got hired, in the meantime, then Jim Williams, Jim.
I do.
Jim went to work for the state. And anyway, when Lewis got his surveyor's license, Jim and I didn't have to worry about pulling no Saturday stuff or anything like that.
Right.
We worked with Lewis just about every weekend.
Yep.
But that I got more involved in the survey end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically from that. Now, back when I started, we had surveyors. There was a survey crew, and then there was an inspection crew. Every now and then, some of us inspectors would help them, but we didn't have anything major to do with them. But I wanted to learn how to do some of that. And there again, when Lewis saw that I was wanting to learn some stuff, he got me kind of off and taught me how to read the vernier on the transit and, all that kind of stuff. So it got to where we had the survey crew there, the survey party, and which is usually 6 or 7 people, which is way too many, really.
Right.
But
it's more than I ever had.
Yeah, there was other little smaller things that we might need done on a job, but the survey party would be off on another job doing something. So Claude was able to get some additional equipment. So then me, Lewis, and Jim, and then there was another guy, Jimmy, we started doing some of our own survey stuff on the jobs that we were inspecting. And back then, you had to, all the work had to be done, all the control points and everything were put in place by the state.
Right. State did layout and all kind of stuff.
All of it. Every bit of it.
Yep.
So I got a good lesson in all of that. And it got to where, it just became part of our normal job. Once they saw that we could do that, we wound up doing most of it. Now, if it's big, heavy stuff, now we get the survey party in. But,
right.
One of the main things, though, was the way the system worked back then was it was the responsibility of the highway department to give the contractor grades.
Yep.
For everything. And I've spent many a night at my kitchen table working on grades so the contractor could have them the following day in order to do his work.
Because if you didn't have them, he was sure going to say it was your fault, wasn't he?
Exactly. I mean, and that was the number one thing. You don't hold the contractor
That's
up.
right.
You just don't do it. That was one of the number one things. You don't hold the contractor up.
Yep.
But we got to doing that, kind of I spent a lot of time, lots of hours at my kitchen table.
When did that change over to where the state kind of got out of the business of providing all that and put it on the contractor?
Probably about in the mid 80s, maybe mid to late 80s, I'd say.
Okay.
They put that responsibility on the contractor.
Right.
And one time they said, okay, this is up to the contractor to do. We don't want to see y'all with the instrument set up out there. This falls on the contractor now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's all well and good. But we wound up with some things that didn't work out just right. But we weren't allowed to put points in anymore. But they wanted us to check them. Well, if you don't, you have to set your instrument up to verify things.
And you got to know you got a good point, right?
Exactly.
Versus using what they've got.
Exactly.
They may be wrong from the start.
Right. And we found that to be true. So they kind of changed up a little bit on that. It was still basically, contractor does it. But what they did, they got people that work out of the district office, a regular sure enough survey thing. They would come by and check points, things like that. Now, they wasn't there on the job day by day, looking after things, but they would come and they would check, points here and there. And but we finally learned to kind of keep an eye on what they were doing while they were doing it,
right?
And kind of went from there. And it's I don't know, it's the layout is really critical, and a lot of times the contractor's out there and he's trying to do right, but you could notice it's mostly small things that when the contractor do it, it just didn't come out. Their lines and everything, and pouring concrete, just about all concrete poured in any kind of structure has a cambered end to it or something or other, and you should be able to look down that thing and be straight as can be. But we found, after they pull the forms off, you'd see, irregularities, waves, and everything. And, we brought that to the attention of the district engineer as well as Little Rock. And we had meetings a lot.
Yep.
And they did listen. They did listen to us. And they began to crack down just a little bit, try to make the contractors do things just a little bit tighter, rather than let these little things go.
Well, and the difference is, when you guys are doing it, you guys are all trained to a standard, right? The state's got ideas of how to do it, but when it's contractors, it's low bid work. Every contractor's not created equal. So one of them may have somebody who knows how to, run a total station or run a level, but the other may show up with a tape measure and some stakes,
That's exactly it right there.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of that, they did get the contractors and all the state employees that were involved in any kind of testing. They had to be certified in it. And it was one of the deals that was done through the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville.
Right.
It's still something that goes on. And it's a pretty extensive little school. It's a 3 or 4 day thing where you do everything. The reason for that, they want all the tests. They want the tests that the state runs to be the exact same test that the contractor runs.
Right.
And that being said, a lot of times you would split a sample, whether it be gravel, dirt, whatever the material was, you would split the sample and then compare. And if there was something bad off, you'd pull another sample before you said, oh, no, you got to tear that out. Anything, you'd run another sample, both of you. And it all come from the same pile. And there is a specific way of splitting the sample. It's not just like, okay, I'm take a shovel and give you 2 shovelfuls, and I'll take 2 shovelfuls. That's not the way it's done. There's a procedure and some equipment that you use to physically split that sample.
Yeah.
But and that turned out to be a pretty good thing. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, before the contractor had to do the testing, they would they would think, well, that inspector don't like me. They're just making me redo this because they don't like me or anything. Well, that kind of changed once the contractor started having to do his own work, and some of the contractors got mad at their testing people because it would fail or something.
Yeah, because now they're testing people are mad at them or don't like them, right?
Exactly. But all in all, that wound up being a good thing, and it's still something that's practiced today. You know, I've been retired. I retired from the state in 2005. It's hard to believe. I've been out almost 14 years, I guess.
Yeah.
I still have.
No, that's coming up on 20 years. That's 19.
Boy, you're right. Golly.
The
Yeah,
years
you're
fly
right.
by.
But anyway, I still keep in touch with some of the highway department people. They call from time to time. Same with. I made a lot of friends, and I actually like works for. Really well. I really did. I really like working for them.
I tell you, it was absolutely a good spot, and you know, for me, it was a good spot because you know you were coming back out of retirement, wanted to still be in the business. I got in 08, 09, so you know, and I was in the land surveying business. Everybody was out of a job if you were in residential, so I was looking for anything, and getting in on the survey side and working with you know Jim Smith and all the people that we did like. Man, I had my own business, had a license, everything.
Right.
Like I should know what I'm doing. And construction staking was so much different than residential that, man, I didn't know anything. And so guys like you and Jim Smith, Jim Williams, and Gary Thomas, those guys, like I learned so much that first year just soaking it up like a sponge, like I've never done it. But like learning how to read a set of plans, learning how to figure curves and how to do slope staking, just all these things that you never do otherwise.
Right.
And it gets you know, people take it for granted when they drive down the road. They don't think about it.
That's true. They don't. But there's a lot more goes into the surveying than most people realize. There's so much more that you know, just the layout of the project itself. You know, it has to be right or it's not going to come together like it should.
Yeah. Even like you were talking about when you kind of got started, they were completing the interstate, I-40, right? So the start of that, because all that is somebody's property all the way down through there. So establishing what you're going to take, what's still theirs, where the lines are, all that stuff's important because I-40's still there.
Yeah,
it didn't go away.
We used to, some of the guys that I ran around with, of course, we all drank at an early age.
Yeah.
But we would get out there on the interstate thing when it was closed, when it dumped the dirt and gravel and stuff. We went out there one time and we saw hammer handles go into the ground, just barely sticking up. We thought, well, what in the heck is this? So we got us some of them. Well, I found out what all that was about. You know, when I did go to work for the state, you know, that's what they established a grade on and everything. But we gathered up a lot of them. Yeah. They barely stuck in the ground.
Made a lot of work for somebody else the next day.
A lot.
So as you got into it, and we're doing more of it, getting more into it, you got to see everything, right? You got to see it from the beginning of a project, a new road where there's nothing and we're starting from scratch, or, you know, rebuilding projects, resurfacing and things like that. Were there projects you enjoyed more than others? Were there certain aspects, whether it be bridges or asphalt or dirt, that you enjoyed more than others?
I liked probably the new location projects more because, just like you mentioned, you start from scratch. You have a point of beginning.
Yep.
And you start from that one point and you establish the line and the grade as you go. And we used to do a lot of that during our winter months when the contractor couldn't work. We would do our own surveying. There used to be a thing where each county would turn over so many miles of county road to the state, and it would be taken into the highway system. And a lot of times what we would do during the winter months was survey it out and everything, and then work up the plans ourselves.
Right.
And that was pretty good. It was pretty enjoyable doing that kind of stuff. But then they got to where a lot of the plans that we were getting, you had to spend a lot of time going through the plans, catching errors. Mm-hmm. They were hiring a lot of the young engineers, and they'd put them drawing plans. And that was one thing, in my opinion, that, anybody who's going to draw up a set of plans needs to have some field experience before they do. You know, you can put a pencil a lot of places. You can't put a piece of equipment.
That is a great way to put it. That's exactly right.
But it got to be a pretty much everyday thing. Even when I went to work, I was still doing that. They would have me go through the plans, proofread them, and after you do it, you know what you're looking for and everything. It's not that really a big of a deal. There's a lot of math calculations that you have to keep up with, just checking the quantities and everything.
You got to have a little imagination, too, to kind of build the job in your mind.
Right. But well, you do. You actually do. You start from nothing, and you have to visualize it. Speaking of that, when I was with they come out with a program. Right now, I can't remember the name of the program. But it was something you set up, and you would go over. It would project the end date on a job.
Oh, your project stuff, like, what was it, Primavera or something like that?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It was that you had to, you had to use some past history of the weather, of the different quantities, how much you think you could do in a day's time.
Production
or
totals.
It's a pretty complicated program, but once you get it set up, you just punch a button or two, and it'll tell you, you know, whether you're on course to finish it at the appropriate time, or you're ahead of schedule, or you're behind schedule.
Right.
And I was really getting involved in that. They had Jim had got me a program. It wasn't the Primavera, it wasn't the top one, but it was one below that. But he got that for me to. He was doing the big stuff.
Right.
I had the same job on the smaller thing. I was learning it. I was, and it was really interesting doing that. It really was, to see there would be one thing, you know, you might could change something that's holding everything else back, because you have to go in order. You know, you can't put stripes on the road until you get the asphalt on it.
That's right.
Something, but so you had to have a logical. What do we call it? Steps, logical steps in the construction part, and that program would keep up with it, and it would tell you, you know,
it was the critical path.
Exactly. That's what it is. The critical path.
I didn't run any of it, but, you know, sitting in the back of some of those meetings and, you know, production meetings and stuff, you would hear that, you know, the schedule dictates. The schedule tells you what you're going to do.
Exactly.
You may think you need to be digging ditches this week, but the critical path says this is what we're doing over here.
Right.
And that was the one that was impressive to me, that if you had good data going in, if you set it up correctly, and, you know, we had people that were just this side of magicians running that program.
Right.
But if you set it up correctly, that thing would smooth out so many of the hiccups.
And it would show, the contractor could look at it and, you know, he would know himself. He wasn't like he's guessing at anything. They got to doing that because they try to minimize the time, particularly on the federal highways and, sure enough, the interstate system. To the point that they had a lot of incentive and disincentive on the projects themselves. They try to get it completed in as short a time as possible.
Right.
It caused them to come out with a different way of letting contracts. Typically a contract, you have so many items that make up that contract, and there's a unit price for those items, and that's all you've got to go by. You do that, and there again, you know, the contractor has to have some kind of idea how long it's going to take him to haul, you know, X number of yards of dirt or gravel or asphalt or whatever.
Right.
But it got to the point where, let me try to think how to put this in words. You'd come to rely on this better program. A lot of contracts were let where the bid items were cheap. They were going to make contractors, they would bid the job cheap sometimes with the intentions of making it up on the incentive part of it for getting through earlier.
Right.
And these interstate projects and the federal highways, major federal highways, the incentive is really, really good on most all of them.
Right.
And but I mean, at the same token, there's a disincentive too. If you don't do it, then it costs you the same. That, you know, it's the same dollar amount.
liquidated damages, right? We came in late. You get charged.
That would be separate.
Okay.
You got a liquidated damages that if you got a certain drop dead date that it has to be done there. But you also have on these other projects, you have to bid working days.
Okay.
And that's where your incentive and disincentive came in.
Gotcha.
Now, if you went over anyway, you're going to pay liquidated damages.
Right.
You ain't getting out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the more contractors got to using it, I think they liked it just as much as the state did. And it was actually up to the contractor to do all the filling out. He did it himself. Jim pretty well did it on all the jobs, not just the highway jobs at the airport and what have you. Do things like that for the betterment of the company, I guess you'd say. Once you got onto that, and about the time I quit, I was just really beginning to get a good grip on a lot of that. And I've often thought, maybe I should try to get back in again. I really enjoyed that. I really liked it. You mentioned building something in your mind prior to it being built. That's what it's like. If you sit down, you want to do it yourself, and that's what I like. Jim got me that lesser program to play with, and it's just like we were talking earlier. When you get ready, the first thing you do is survey a job out. You start at a point.
Mm-hmm.
Then you do the same thing with that program. You got to start on X number or a day, March the 1st or whatever. Yep. And you have to go in succession in your mind in order to set this program up. And that's pretty interesting. You get to doing that, and there's times, I'll do this, but then you get to the end of it and you push a button to see where it goes, and it's got you way, way out. Well, you've entered something wrong. Yeah. There's so many things, each month, by history. Here we go again on the history stuff. Just like, for instance, during the month of January, historically, there may be 3 days that month that, you could work, and then in April, you may could work 21 days. Right. And all that's taken into consideration when you set all this stuff up. And if you have 21 days, say, for instance, in April, and you've got some kind of project that says it's going to take you 30 days to complete that, but you've only got 21 days historically. Right. But yet if you wind up getting it done, way before you should, it's unreal how much it'll shoot that end date, pull it back down or whatever. And same token, if you've got an error in there, it's liable to push it way out, and something's not right there.
Yeah, your 30-day job says it's going to take 2 years.
Yeah. Then you got problems. But anyway, I really got interested in doing that. Just kind of playing with the machine itself, doing stuff. I did it like I was going to build a house. Right. Everything. Well, I built that out there. I built my house.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So I kind of knew where I needed to start. Right. How many days I'd put in there just to see, how it worked. Because I just built a little simple something. But then after I saw I could do that, then I started working on actual jobs, putting the same data in that Jim was putting in the big program and stuff. Of course, we wouldn't be exact, but, we'd have about every other week we'd meet with the highway department to go over the schedule. And I would have my schedule done, and Jim would have his done, because mine didn't make any difference. His did.
Right.
Hello, it's me again. We're going to stop here for this episode. Robert and I covered so much ground that it felt wrong to trim it all down. Next episode, we will hear the rest of the interview where we talk more about technology, safety, and how a little effort can go a long way. That next episode will be ready on April 15th, which also coincides with the beginning of National Work Zone Awareness Week. The motto this year is, "Work zones are temporary, actions behind the wheel can last forever." This is a nationwide campaign that lasts the entire week. I won't get up on my soapbox just yet, but this is an important week for all of us in the industry, and it holds an especially memorable spot in the hearts of myself and others you will hear on this show. Now, my road food pick this week is Granddaddy's Original Hot Chicken Shack in Old Hickory, Tennessee. Anytime you go to Nashville, hot chicken has to be on your food list, and in my opinion, this place should be close to the top. Hot chicken typically is just hot, then hotter. there isn't always a lot of flavor. Granddaddy's does an awesome job of giving you both. On top of that, Granddaddy and family are always there to treat you right and tell you the history of hot chicken. If you go, tell them the Safety Man sent you. They'll have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Special thanks to our guest, Robert Skinner. Thanks to Tennessee Tucker for our music. Thanks to Amelia Hall for our cover art. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell someone about it. Leave us a review and a rating and help us find a bigger audience. If you have comments or suggestions, send those to safetymancoming@gmail.com. There's no G on the end of Safety Man Coming. Also, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Safety Man Coming. All right, join us next episode as we continue our conversation with Robert on Safety Man Coming.